Mark chapter 5 verses 21 through 43. Our Savior Jesus Christ destroyed death, and brought life to light, through the Gospel. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials, named Jairus, came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please, come lay your hands on her that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died, why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So, he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead but asleep." And they ridiculed him. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this and said that she should be given something to eat. Mark tells the story of Jairus' daughter and will sandwich in the story about the hemorrhaging woman. Why put the short story in the middle of a larger story? Mark's Jesus is just what his Roman audience wants, a fast-paced, dynamic, and an important leader. On the way to Jairus' house, Jesus, just like us, encounters delays and obstacles on the road. Jairus' faith saved his daughter, but not before the woman touched Jesus and slowed his progress on the way. Jairus was an elected leader of the local synagogue. He was responsible for supervising the weekly worship, running the school, and caring for the building. Many synagogue leaders had close ties to the Pharisees. It is likely, therefore, that some synagogue leaders had been pressured not to support Jesus. For Jairus to bow before Jesus was a significant and perhaps daring act of respect and worship. The woman's disorder would have made her ritually unclean. It would have excluded her from most social contact and worship at the temple. She desperately wanted Jesus to heal her, but she knew that her bleeding would also cause Jesus to become unclean, under Jewish law, if she touched him. Jesus' miraculous healing of the woman who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years was recorded in 3 of the 4 Gospels. This woman had heard about Jesus' miracle-working power, and had come to Capernaum to find him. Tradition tells us she was from Caesarea Philippi. Jesus was not angry with this woman for touching him. He knew she had touched him, but he stopped and asked who did it in order to teach everyone there a lesson about the need and benefits to having faith. Although the woman was healed when she touched him, Jesus said her faith caused the cure. Genuine faith involves action. Faith that isn't put into action is not faith at all. She walked 30 miles in faith. James chapter 2 verse 20, "Do you want proof, you ignoramus, that faith without works is useless? Loud weeping and wailing were customary at a person's deathbed. Lack of it was the ultimate disgrace and disrespect. There were some people, usually women, who made mourning a profession, and were paid by the dead person's family to weep over the body. On the day of death, the body was carried through the streets, followed by mourners, family members, and friends. The mourners began to laugh at Jesus when he said, "The child isn't dead, she is only asleep." The girl was dead, but Jesus used the image of sleeping to indicate that her condition was temporary, and that she would be restored. Jesus tolerated the crowd's abuse in order to teach an important lesson about maintaining hope and trust in God. Jesus not only demonstrated great power, he also showed tremendous compassion. Rabbis of the day would have considered the hemorrhaging woman and the dead girl unclean, and would have avoided them. Jesus didn't consider them unclean and broke with tradition by touching each one. He gave the parents orders that no one should know this. Why? He wanted the facts to speak for themselves, and the time was not yet right for a major confrontation with the religious leaders. Jesus still had much to accomplish, and he didn't want people following him just to see him as a miracle worker. Faith is the realization of what is hoped for, and evidence of things not seen. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1.